It's the new nose that has betrayed us. My Grandma SquarePants always says, punish the nose, not the man.
Ready to see some SpongeBob animation errors? Well, relax yourselves, get comfy, because here are some animation errors that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1, no nose nose. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to have a new nose? Well, this might be one of the most special episodes in SpongeBob's history because we aren't used to seeing Patrick with a big nose, right? We might not be the only ones who aren't used to it because this episode brought a whole new experience into Patrick's life. After getting a new nose, Patrick begins to experience a whole new wave of smells and sensation unknown to him before that. This might sound like a great and cool thing, but with all these new things coming into his life, he also starts to change his behavior, and these new smells were driving our favorite starfish crazy. But too much of an intro here, so let's get ready to see some animation errors.
This is inexcusable! Yuck!
What are you doing with my cheese?
It's rotten garbage now.
Patrick took things personal with some of the newer scents he discovered during this episode, and it seems like Squidward's cheese was one of Patrick's biggest enemies during this episode. Well, in the scene in which Patrick is wearing a gas mask to protect himself from the strong scent of that delicious cheese, something strange happens. As we told you some seconds ago, Patrick wore a gas mask to combat the cheese's smell, but at the very next scene in which we see Patrick shooting a rocket launcher to the bin in which he put the cheese, the mask has completely disappeared. Maybe Patrick's anger against that scent was so big that he lost his mind. But let's continue.
Hi, Pat.
Take a bath, Fleabag!
Well, if we just saw Patrick throwing a rocket against a bin, now we see him throwing spray to his own friends. In this scene, we see that Patrick is angry with Sandy, and he proceeds to shoot our squirrel friend with a spray. The weirdest thing is that even if Sandy is wearing a helmet to survive underwater, she starts to choke when the spray hits her. This is such a weird animation error. Number 2, hooky. Who doesn't like playing with some fishing hooks? Well, our protagonists discovered a new hobby during this episode, playing with some strange hooks that suddenly have reappeared in the depths of Bikini Bottom. This is not the first time that those hooks have been causing trouble to the inhabitants of our favorite underwater town, because much like Mr. Krabs warns SpongeBob, if he gets caught by one of those hooks, he will be drawn to the surface and sold in a gift shop. How scary this sounds, right? Well, this story created a very strange and special episode born in the early years of the show, and we decided that it's a great one to watch and enjoy. But without losing any more time, let's look at some cool details we've found.
But we'll find another. Hopefully, one that'll listen to old Mr. Krabs.
Oh, Mr. Krabs, I'll listen, I promise. Whoa! Whoa! Please save me, Mr. Krabs!
Oh, look!
It's SpongeBob Nudie Pants!
Well, that was more of SpongeBob than I needed to see.
Mr. Squidward, that was some fine angling. Do you think the lad has learned his lesson?
Isn't it strange that SpongeBob is getting drawn outside the Krusty Krab when the one who's hooking him is inside the restaurant? Well, this scene had one weird detail that took us many times to finally find, and after rewatching it over and over again, we found one curious moment that we needed to show you. When SpongeBob is getting hooked out of the Krusty Krab, we see that what is being used to grab him comes from outside the restaurant. Right? After getting super scared and thinking that this would be the end of our protagonist, we jump a couple frames later to discover that it was Squidward who was playing with the hook and trying to scare SpongeBob. But how? When Squidward is shown in the next scene, he's inside the restaurant, but the hook was coming from the outside. Such a mind-blowing moment. But let's move on into the next one.
We'll find another. Hopefully, one that'll listen to old Mr. Krabs.
Oh, Mr. Krabs, I'll listen, I promise.
It's SpongeBob Nudie Pants.
Well, that was more of SpongeBob than I needed to see.
Like we said before, this hooky incident looked like it was the end of SpongeBob, or at least for a brief moment, but this scene also had something funny with itself. Let's take a look. When SpongeBob is getting hooked, we see that Mr. Krabs is putting a sign that says "Help Wanted" on the Krusty Krab's door. Well, some scenes after, when we have a close-up of SpongeBob's face in the door of the restaurant, we see that the sign is no longer there. It has magically disappeared. This could be one of the most famous episodes from the whole series, but it also had some weird things attached to it. Number 3, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 2. Who doesn't want to meet his greatest heroes? SpongeBob and Patrick decided to spend a great day with Bikini Bottom's greatest heroes and have some awesome adventures. Even if this is not the first time that we see these heroes in action, this episode revolves around them spending a whole day with SpongeBob and the debut of one of the most evil villains that has ever stepped foot on the depths of Bikini Bottom, the terrifying Dirty Bubble. But we don't want to spoil the whole episode, so we recommend that you watch this absolute classic. Now, let's check some cool moments.
The invisible boatmobile lost a wheel and... Hey, can I drive?
Drive? What do you know about driving the invisible boatmobile?
Tons! Like the windshield wipers are right here.
Don't touch that button, it's the...
Seems like SpongeBob had a somewhat strange superhero outfit, right? Or at least that's what we caught watching this episode. While our hero is riding an imaginary car with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, he's shown wearing a strange headband all around his squared head. Well, in this scene, there are a couple of frames in which his headband completely covers SpongeBob's eyes. Maybe there's more about superheroes than we thought.
I can't believe it! I rode in the invisible boatmobile, met a villain, and learned to treat third-degree burns, all in one day. So, what are we gonna do tomorrow?
This was not the only time we were going to hear about that headband. In the scene in which all of the 3 superheroes are having dinner, SpongeBob again has some problems with his headband. This time, the headband covers more than it should and occupies part of SpongeBob's eyes. Also, he doesn't have eyelashes on this one. Such a cool episode. Number 4, House Sitting for Sandy. If you were about to leave your house for a couple of days, would you leave SpongeBob as your house sitter? In this episode, Sandy thought that after she had to leave her house alone for some time, SpongeBob would be the perfect candidate to take care of it during her absence. Little did she know that, much like always when it comes to SpongeBob, things didn't go exactly as the squirrel thought. Because maybe it wasn't SpongeBob's fault, but some chaos was created. Let's see what we found in this episode.
I never thought I'd go out like this.
At the hands of a squirrel?
No, with a fishbowl on my head.
Well, SpongeBob and Patrick got a little scared after making this big mess in Sandy's house. In this scene, in which Sandy is about to use her reversal beam, we see that SpongeBob is holding a beaker, right? Looking at SpongeBob some moments after, we see that he no longer has that beaker when Sandy is about to shoot him. But right after that, when everything is repaired, he has the beaker again. What a weird moment.
There you go.
Maybe the laws of gravity function in a different way while you're underwater? Much like many other times, we know that our protagonists aren't able to breathe while they're inside Sandy's house. Well, in the scene in which we see SpongeBob dehydrating due to the lack of water, we see that Patrick is holding a water helmet upside down. But how's the water not falling from the helmet if it's upside down? Such a strange detail in an already messy episode. Number 5, Inspongiac. We all know that sleeping is a key part of everyone's mental health, right? Poor SpongeBob, he couldn't have a break and sleep well during this episode. This was a very bad episode for our protagonist because due to being insomniac, he started to have some troubles in both his life and his work in the Krusty Krab. He even needed Patrick's help to get through this problem. Maybe it was due to this lack of sleep that this episode had some animation errors. Let's look at them.
Now you go home and get some rest.
Oh, but sir, I can't miss work at the Krusty Krab.
Miss work? If you keep making mistakes like that, boyo, there will be no Krusty Krab.
Krusty Krab?
That's right. Now get.
Uh-oh, SpongeBob's poor sleeping has been causing trouble in his eyes. We needed a couple of times before we found this animation error, but if you look closely at SpongeBob's eyes when Mr. Krabs is sending him home so he can take some rest, there is one fast frame in which SpongeBob's right eye turns yellow for a moment. Our protagonist for sure needs some sleep.
What am I gonna do? I need some help.
It's pretty normal to ask for help from your friends when something is wrong, and everything might look normal in this scene, but when SpongeBob is so nervous that he needs to see Patrick so he can help him with his insomniac ways, Squidward's house is nowhere to be seen in the street. For sure, Patrick is SpongeBob's best friend, but what a way to forget about Squidward. SpongeBob Goofs and Errors? Here we have some of them ready to be discovered. Number 1. Krusty Love Fester. Did you know that crabs also have feelings? This episode might be the first time that we see Mr. Krabs falling in love with someone. What are we saying? It's the first time that Mr. Krabs shows feelings for someone that's not his daughter Pearl. Anyway, let's leave those feelings aside and see some cool scenes, because this is what we're here for.
Mrs. Puff, I'd like to introduce you to my boss, Mr. Krabs.
Hello?
Mr. Krabs, say hello.
I think that longtime SpongeBob fans will know exactly what's going on here, but those who aren't experts may need to watch this scene a couple of times to know what is happening. In case you haven't found the error yet, we will show it right now. If you look at SpongeBob's teeth when he's whispering to Mr. Krabs, the trademark hole that he has between his teeth disappears. But this is not the only thing that raised our eyes during the episode. Let's continue watching.
You're spoiling me, Mr. Krabs. I mean, foot rubs between courses, caricatures, imported music.
Choosing a great outfit for a first date is really important, right? Well, for sure, Mr. Krabs was aware of this, and it led to a great animation error in this episode. For those who have great eyes, if you look carefully at Mr. Krabs' attire, there's a frame in which his suit changes to his normal clothes. This is strange since Mr. Krabs spent a long time waiting for this date, but maybe his nerves got the best of him on this one. Number 2, I'm your biggest fanatic. Who wants to enter a super cool fraternity? We know that SpongeBob has made some really good and precious friendships during the nearly 20 years that his adventures have been aired on TV. But do you remember that time when he wanted to join the Jelly Spotters? Well, in case you don't, we recommend you watch this episode because it's filled with surprises and funny moments, much like SpongeBob passing some tests, him catching big jellyfish, and many other cool moments that we want you to enjoy. So let's jump to the cool errors and moments we found here.
When I pass this test, I'll be an official jellyfish spotter.
Music.
Did you know that weather changes while you're underwater? Well, SpongeBob animators may know more things than we do, or at least this is what happens in this scene. After revisiting this moment of the episode a couple of times, we found that something strange happened here. In case you weren't able to catch it, when SpongeBob gets tied and left alone, the camera goes to the surface and we see that the sun is already falling down and the afternoon is coming. coming, giving the sky a reddish tone. Well, some frames after, we go back to Bikini Bottom's depths, and even if SpongeBob is still tied to those posts, the sky is no longer red, so there's no afternoon underwater. This is strange because we have seen many other times that night exists in Bikini Bottom, so they should also have to go through the afternoon. Such a strange situation.
Punch yourself in the face. Doesn't that hurt you?
Do you want it to hurt me, Kevin? That is the best!
How many fingers does SpongeBob have? Well, this question might be confusing in case you haven't ever seen SpongeBob SquarePants. In this scene, we see that SpongeBob is holding an iron boxing glove. At first, this might sound pretty normal, but things change if you take a good look at his hand. Usually, SpongeBob has 4 fingers on his hand, but when wearing this glove, he has 5 fingers instead of 4. Maybe this was also one of the trials that he had to pass to join the fraternity. Number 3, the original fry cook. Imagine that the previous person who was in charge of your job comes back one day. I'm pretty sure that some ghost from the past hit you. In this episode from the 5th season of the show, we are presented to a new character named Jim, but who is this guy? Well, in case you haven't followed SpongeBob's full series, Jim was the previous chef in the Krusty Krab's kitchen, and that causes SpongeBob some insecurity and starts to think that he's gonna lose his job. Will he be able to keep it? We left that detail for you to discover, but now let's go watch some cool scenes.
Wow! That was amazing! Mr. Jim, sir?
Jim for sure has some secret trick up his sleeve, because look at what happens to SpongeBob in this scene. This might sound strange, but if you look at SpongeBob's eyes in this scene, one of his eyes has its eyelashes on top, while the eye is semi-open, leaving them heavily misplaced. Maybe his job isn't the only thing SpongeBob is losing on this episode.
You see, SpongeBob, you've got one quality Jim would never have. You're cheap.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
So you'll stay?
Aye, Mr. Krabs.
Like we told you before, SpongeBob's job is not the only thing in danger here. This might take you some tries to catch it, but have you looked at SpongeBob's holes? Well, in case you haven't, if you take a look at SpongeBob's holes while he is laughing with Mr. Krabs, one of those holes becomes transparent for a small frame. You can even see the kitchen's walls through it. What a great comeback episode for Jim. Number 4, Le Big Switch. Did you know that SpongeBob went to a chef exchange program? Trying to expand the quality of his restaurant and bring new dishes to his restaurant's menu, Mr. Krabs has one great idea: sending SpongeBob to a chef exchange program. This would be a great experience for SpongeBob to learn new cooking techniques and cooking even better Krabby Patties. Without losing any more time, let's look at the episode.
And this! I would not wash my own bottom with this after carefully wiping and wiping and wiping. Now go, stand in the corner and think about what you have done.
We've all had a very angry boss once in our lifetimes, right? Well, poor Paco, because his boss hit him so hard that he caused an animation error. In case you missed it, when Mr. Crustacean slaps Paco twice, the cooking hat that he is wearing disappears for a brief moment. Of course, Mr. Crustacean is a very demanding boss, but he crossed the line on this one.
You sold me!
No! Bartered is more like it. They keep you, I keep my kneecaps.
Come on, Mac. You're pathetic!
Well, it seems like somebody has some problems with his eyes. Here, when the 2 security guards are taking Squidward out of the Krusty Krab, one of them experiences a weird change on his eyeballs. Did you find it? Well, in case you didn't, in this scene, one of the guards misses both his irises and pupils from his eyes for a couple frames. Maybe they put too much effort on sending Squidward out of the restaurant. Number 5, Bucket, Sweet Bucket. Sometimes you even have to take care of your biggest enemies. What would be a great video if we don't talk about Plankton? In case you were missing Bikini Bottom's worst villain, here is a small episode in which he is the protagonist. This episode revolves around SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward helping Plankton fix the chum bucket to see if he can change the image of his restaurant and gain some more clients. But much like always happens with Plankton, things are only made for his own interests. Let's watch it.
SpongeBob, what atrocity is this?
Oh, hi, Squidward. Looky, Mr. Plankton's having us paint. He calls it pizzazz.
Pizzazz!
SpongeBob's lashes have been the protagonist of many errors, but what is happening to them in this scene? This might be an easy one for you to find. When SpongeBob is talking on top of the chum bucket, there's a moment in which he closes his eyes, but his eyelashes stay on top of his eyes, much like they're opened. This is a pretty small error, but still one to be considered nonetheless.
Oh well, at least it's structurally sound. Forget this! I'm sick of not having any business.
Then why don't you fix this rust bucket up? Look around.
We had Plankton as the protagonist on this one, and boy, this is a very funny error. At the beginning of the episode, Plankton is shown walking inside the chum bucket. The insides of the restaurant look very deteriorated, and this causes a door to fall on him. After the door falls, when Plankton's eyebrow disappears for a few seconds, and suddenly it comes back. Poor Plankton, he doesn't seem to have any kind of luck. These are the scariest SpongeBob episodes that you can find on SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1. Shanghaied. The Flying Dutchman is for sure one of the most iconic characters in SpongeBob SquarePants. But do you remember the first time that this ghost made an appearance? Well, let's check it out. In this classic from the second season of the show, both Patrick and SpongeBob start investigating a mysterious anchor that suddenly fell from the sky and ended up crushing SpongeBob's living room. Fearing about what this strange object could be, they showed it to Squidward, thus learning about the legend of the terrifying ghost known as the Flying Dutchman. In typical SpongeBob fashion, he ends up boarding this creepy ghost's ship, and when the captain discovers their intentions, they end up getting caught and afraid of joining this immortal crew for all eternity. Many crazy things happen to our protagonists while serving the Flying Dutchman. For example, after Squidward is thrown into a chaotic dimension for complaining about serving the Dutchman, both SpongeBob and Patrick are warned that their work is useless, so the Dutchman reveals he's going to eat them. After receiving such shocking news, SpongeBob and Patrick then embark on a mission to steal the Dutchman's famous dining sock, which he can't eat without. After fighting over the sock and almost breaking it, the Dutchman decides to grant them 3 wishes in exchange for this appreciated item's safe return. Patrick wishes he knew about this earlier, and the clock is set back 1 minute. SpongeBob quickly wishes that Squidward was with them, and he's brought back. When it's time to decide who gets the last wish, SpongeBob is given the privilege, but not before the others also get their chance. In the end, our heroes came back home pretty safely after this creepy adventure, but not only that, they ended up befriending one of Bikini Bottom's most feared ghosts. In hindsight, this episode ended up being one of the most famous of the show's entire history, and the Flying Dutchman changed from a creepy legendary ghost to an awesome member of this awesome show's cast of amazing characters. Number 2, a pal for Gary. Jumping from one scary monster to an even scarier one, did you know that SpongeBob tried to adopt a friend for Gary? Well, in case you don't, we present you Puffy Fluffy. We know that SpongeBob is very concerned with his job, right? But we also know that SpongeBob loves his pet snail, Gary. How could he fix that so Gary does not feel lonely when SpongeBob's not at home? Well, in this fantastic adventure from the 7th season of the show, our protagonist found a great solution to that, adopting a new pet so Gary would have a great companion while he's away. The sad thing is that things didn't go as SpongeBob planned because Puffy turns out to be quite a bully, harassing Gary at any moment when they're alone. Even though Gary is of course innocent and the victim here, SpongeBob still believes that Gary is the troublemaker and not Puffy. In one horrific moment, Puffy ends up turning into a large reptilian monster of sorts and even attempts to eat Gary at one point. SpongeBob finds his house in a mess and still feels all of this might be Gary's undoing out of jealousy from Puffy. Poor Gary, he's SpongeBob's best boy and didn't deserve the blame for all this mess. We selected this episode because the monstrous slug-like appearance of Puffy's final version had everything that a monster should have, from pointy teeth to an alien-like tongue. This is one episode that you should revisit during Halloween season without any doubts. Number 3, Graveyard Shift. Have you ever heard about the cold-blooded assassin known as the hash-slinging slasher? In this episode from the younger days of the show's lifespan, our protagonists had to face the menace of having this killing machine stalking them. Or at least that's what they thought. Let's take a look at this episode together. One night, our protagonists prepare the Krusty Krab for its 8 p.m. closing, which comes none too soon for Squidward. However, right before closing, one customer walks up to the door and attempts to make an order. Squidward smugly informs him that they are closed, and the customer prepares to take his money elsewhere. As we know, losing money is never a choice in Mr. Krabs' plans, and seeing that people might even come at night, he decides that now the Krusty Krab will be open the full 24 hours of the day. Poor SpongeBob, he never has a moment to rest. Bored with the night shift, Squidward develops one of his magnificent plans to annoy SpongeBob, and this time he decides to conjure up a spooky tale to creep out SpongeBob. The protagonist of that story was the hash-slinging slasher, a former fry cook whose clumsiness lost him a hand, which was later replaced with a spatula. He later got run over by a bus and was fired from his job at his funeral, and now he comes to the Krusty Krab every Tuesday to achieve his vengeance. This story lurked throughout the whole night that both SpongeBob and Squidward had to spend at the Krusty Krab, and even if we discover that our assassin was just a normal guy that held a spatula in his hand, this episode had an awesome and creepy atmosphere. Also, this SpongeBob episode might be an homage to the slasher movies from the 80s and 90s, but for sure, it was a really scary one to watch. Number 4, Spongehenge. Jumping from one homage to another, have you ever seen the movie The Planet of the Apes? Well, if you have, this unsettling episode might ring a bell for you. This episode might not look like a scary one at first, but the atmosphere that it creates is for sure worth mentioning. Everything goes south when a strange storm filled with harsh winds strikes Bikini Bottom. These winds are causing SpongeBob's pores to whistle a tune that attracts jellyfish, leaving SpongeBob without any chance of running away from these cute animals. In the end, SpongeBob is forced to separate himself from society, isolating himself from everyone and living in a cave, becoming a hermit. To ease his solitude, our protagonist creates a stone replica of himself, and sometime after, he decides that this replica will be of great use to distract and trick the jellyfish, so he's free from them. What SpongeBob didn't know is that while he was living in the cave, the Krusty Krab ended up deserted and sank into the ground. After this revelation, SpongeBob realizes how much time the jellyfish made him waste and cries out in despair. Such a sad story. Jumping into the future, we see that a race of strange aliens have appeared in jellyfish fields. Spongehenge has become a major tourist attraction, with many tourists taking pictures of the site. Again, this might not be the scariest episode ever, but for sure it is a really weird one. Number 5, SquidBob Tentacle Pants. Have you imagined what would happen if SpongeBob and Squidward fused themselves together? This might be one of Squidward's worst nightmares, and the writers of the show decided to make that nightmare real in the 4th season of the show. During this episode, Sandy uses a machine that is able to transport things. Sandy shows SpongeBob how it works by teleporting an apple to Mrs. Puff's desk. SpongeBob asks Sandy if it can transport him to the Krusty Krab, so she allows him to try it. In typical SpongeBob fashion, something strange happens, and when he gets there, part of Squidward's arm gets stuck in him, much to everyone's surprise. This led to our protagonists getting fused together, with SpongeBob having his normal head and body, while Squidward's head is sticking out of the upper left. The funny thing is that they are also in control of each other's arms. SpongeBob is controlling Squidward's hand, while Squidward is controlling SpongeBob's. Such a mess they've made. This fusion led to some gross scenarios during the episode, especially in the end of it, because after Squidward's talent fails to amuse audiences, in a fit of rage he ends up fiddling with the machine yet again. This leads to a shot where Squidward has been fused in a ball of flesh with other characters like Sandy and Mr. Krabs. This scene was so gruesome that it even had to be cut from some of the show's reruns. Here are some funny goofs that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Pickles! Can you believe that during one episode, SpongeBob forgot how to put pickles on Krabby Patties? Well, usually the first seasons of shows have some kind of errors, and SpongeBob wasn't the only one who forgot how to do things right in this episode.
I hear SquarePants.
Well, we hope you noticed something strange in this scene. Maybe it sounds strange or you didn't notice, but did you look at SpongeBob's spatula? When SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab, he's wearing his awesome working hat. But in the scene in which he sees his reflection on the spatula, his hat is nowhere to be seen. Maybe the animators forgot that SpongeBob was wearing a hat in that scene, or maybe he took it off screen. Anyway, this is a funny thing to see. Also, it's very rare to see a spatula without slits, right? Well, it seems like the slits only disappear during the scene in which SpongeBob looks at the spatula, because during the rest of the episode, it is filled with them. Let's continue this episode because we found some more errors here.
I hear SquarePants is back.
I'm right here, Bubble Bass.
This might be a little hard to see, but in the scene in which SpongeBob is ready to confront his nemesis during this episode, we see that something strange occurs to our protagonist while he's opening the door. If you look closely, it is possible to find that, for a brief frame, his eyes change their colors, becoming achromatic. For sure, SpongeBob got angry on this one. Remember, guys, never underestimate SpongeBob's talent in the kitchen. The paper. Have you ever played music with just a piece of paper? Well, it seems like SpongeBob is capable of anything. In this classic from the first season of the show, SpongeBob decides to make Squidward angry by using a piece of paper as his favorite toy. Well, SpongeBob's talent is so big that he even plays and composes music with that same piece of paper. Let's take a look at some scenes from the episode.
I didn't play any wrong notes.
Yeah, see, you're playing it like this. When ordinarily it goes like this.
This one is for music enthusiasts, because if you look closely at the scene in which SpongeBob is playing music with his favorite piece of paper, none of the songs and melodies that SpongeBob plays coincide with the notes that are shown. This is so goofy. Also, we found that at the beginning of the episode, both SpongeBob and Patrick's houses are missing. Let's look at one more scene before we finish this one, shall we?
Well, that's the last of it. I've given you everything but the shirt off my back.
When Squidward is telling SpongeBob that he will give him everything he has in exchange for the paper, SpongeBob's teeth turn yellow for a second. Such a funny episode this was. Neptune's spatula. Do you want to have a little chat with Neptune? SpongeBob received a visit from Neptune himself in this episode from the first season of the show, and in this episode he has to demonstrate to the god of the seas itself that he has the material to become a royal cook. But let's look at some funny moments from the episode, shall we?
The light changed.
Patrick.
Hold on, almost there.
Is royal fry cook material? I don't suppose you have any proof.
When Patrick takes the picture of SpongeBob holding a golden spatula, he has his mouth wide open and there are clouds above him. However, when Patrick shows Neptune the picture, SpongeBob is smiling with his mouth shut and there are no clouds in the area. Another cool detail from the episode is that, depending on the scene, the color of Neptune's skin changes from frame to frame, adopting lighter tones every time he appears on screen. What a godly attire. Crabs a la mode. Do you believe that at one time Mr. Krabs turned the Krusty Krab into an ice rink? Having a plan to boycott the Krusty Krab's existence, he decides to turn off the heat in the restaurant. But being the mastermind of business that he is, Mr. Krabs always has a trick up his sleeve, and he uses this chance to transform the restaurant into an ice rink. After seeing this, Plankton puts up a sign saying that the chum bucket is warm and comfy. Everything goes south and Plankton gets very angry when he then sees the customers go back into the Krusty Krab with winter wear. Mr. Krabs has turned the restaurant into an ice rink complete with a Clamboni ride for children. And even SpongeBob has invented patty skates to help him, Squidward, and the customers keep their balance. One of the most curious things from this episode is that customers even prefer cold Krabby Patties. This is even better for Mr. Krabs because he doesn't need to cook them, costing him even less money. So let's take a look at which goofs we've found here.
Squidward, you're always going on about your book club. Read this.
Do not touch thermostat ever.
Seems like somebody forgot how to use the thermostat here. This might be a funny one to catch, but when Mr. Krabs tries to put the thermostat back to the temperature it was before, he moves it in the wrong direction. He was trying to warm the room, but instead the temperature decreased on the screen. Strange, right?
Bit sticky this morning.
Well, an icy restaurant has its cool things, but also its strange ones, right? If you pay attention to the cash register, there are some shots in which the machine is frozen and some others in which it's not. Maybe Mr. Krabs didn't think about this one. A friendly game. Ready to play some mini golf? Well, like you've seen in this episode from the 8th season of the show, SpongeBob decides to build a mini golf inside his own house. This SpongeBob guy doesn't cease to surprise us. Let's watch some cool scenes from the episode and see if we can find some goofs. Did you see what happened when SpongeBob and Patrick hit their balls into Squidward's house? For sure, bad things were supposed to happen, but when SpongeBob walks around blindfolded and destroys Squidward's things, he breaks the same window, even though the window was already broken. Bad boy SpongeBob, he got a negative note on this one for crashing Squidward's things. Did you see what happened with hole 3? Well, this third hole is a really special one because, depending on which scene from the episode you are watching, you might find that it has different obstacles. Maybe animators tried to be super original on this one, or maybe they forgot about how they initially planned things. Using these moments, people have been able to make some incredible memes. Let's take a look at them. Number 1, get out my house. In this classic from the 4th season of the show, SpongeBob demonstrates that sometimes he can be a somewhat annoying neighbor. Here, SpongeBob decides to make Squidward's Sunday a little more interesting. While our favorite protagonists are sleeping, SpongeBob decides to wake all of them using his foghorn. But this is nothing but the first questionable movement that SpongeBob does in this episode. Much like Squidward says, no good neighbor annoys his close ones on a Sunday. But where did the meme regarding this episode start? Let's take a look. Since the episode revolves around Squidward getting annoyed by both Patrick and SpongeBob, one of the most famous scenes of the episode is the one in which Squidward starts to scream loudly and aggressively to our protagonists, yelling at them to get out of his house. This was the perfect chance for the community to make a meme out of this, so people ended up creating a meme in which Squidward starts to kick characters from many other shows out of his house. Such a funny creation. And how cool it is to see your beloved characters making their honorific SpongeBob appearance. Number 2, Handsome Squidward. Who has not seen handsome Squidward's face running around the internet? We're sure that nearly everyone that knows about SpongeBob SquarePants has gotten a glimpse of this change in Squidward's look. But we will explain the origins of this meme in a second. During the episode, The Two Faces of Squidward, Squidward suffers an accident at work due to SpongeBob hitting him really hard with the kitchen's door while Bikini Bottom's most famous squid was trying to enter the Krusty Krab's kitchen. The consequences of this accident were so big that they created one of the most memorable moments in all of internet history. This newer Squidward look has become super popular in many edits, remixes, and a really big quantity of YouTube videos. But not only that, this image has also been parodied by so many fans who have mixed the art of other characters impersonating Squidward's model-like face. But this cute face is not the only meme that was made from this episode. Also, Squidward's strange dance was recreated in many other instances. This meme became so famous it has been featured on Nickelodeon's social media accounts, and a figure of handsome Squidward was released as part of the Masterpiece Memes toy line. Number 3, No, This Is Patrick. Poor Patrick, he was jealous of SpongeBob on this one. In the episode Big Pink Loser, Patrick wakes up one morning and a parcel is thrown into his mouth. Being the curious starfish he is, he decides to open it and finds a large, shiny trophy inside. He becomes so excited that he starts showing everyone his new award, including the jellyfish and even the Bikini Atoll Island. He shows it off to SpongeBob, who then realizes that the trophy is actually for him after spotting his name on it. This motivates Patrick to work extra hard so he can get a trophy for himself, which leads him to start working at the Krusty Krab, thus giving birth to a new meme. There's a scene in the episode in which Patrick is attending calls on the phone for customers that want to make orders from the Krusty Krab. The curious thing about this meme is that every single time Patrick answers the phone, he says, "No, this is Patrick." This created a really big meme on YouTube, especially comparing it to the 300 scene where they shout, "This is Sparta." But this is not the only meme that originated from this episode. Let's look at another one. The meme originated from the scene in which SpongeBob tells Patrick to pick up a jar, but following his own thoughts much as he always does, Patrick doesn't follow SpongeBob's orders and he ends up grabbing another object. Then SpongeBob tells Patrick that it's a certain object. Then Patrick would reply with yes, and the ending would often be disastrous. This ended up transformed into a big meme, with Patrick grabbing every kind of object possible. From guns to rocket launchers to many other guns, this has become a really big meme around the internet. Number 4, Please Come In, SpongeBob. How would you define a normal SpongeBob? Well, in this episode, Squidward insists SpongeBob should become a normal sponge. Trusting his best friend and believing that his words will improve his lifestyle, SpongeBob proceeds to look at a video about how to be normal for beginners in order to change his ways. Then, the next few days at work, SpongeBob starts to slowly change over a 3-week period, changing into a more round-shaped sponge without holes, losing his buck teeth, having a small nose and freckleless cheeks. Also, he changes his manners, becoming more mild-mannered than usual. Much like we've seen before, this scene was perfect to create a whole new meme that will reign the internet for a long time. In this case, the scene in which Squidward encourages the newer normal SpongeBob to enter his house is the one selected to create newer and funnier scenarios. The SpongeBob community used this to welcome characters from different franchises into SpongeBob's world. Let's take a look.
Hi, how are you?
I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but please come in. I'm Tom.
I'm Jerry.
I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but please come in.
What an amazing and funny meme. Number 5, SpongeBob watches TV. What do you think SpongeBob watches on TV? Well, this meme may not be in pair with the overall plot of the episode, but the community put a lot of effort into creating a good one out of this episode. At the start of the episode, SpongeBob is sitting on his sofa watching TV and seeing an anemone dancing. Well, in case you haven't thought about that, this is a very good scene to create a meme from, and SpongeBob's community didn't miss his chance to do that here. The basis of this meme is that instead of watching the anemone, people decided to put their favorite shows and cartoons on SpongeBob's TV, reflecting themselves into SpongeBob's living room and sofa. Because who hasn't ever dreamed about being the protagonist of a show as important as SpongeBob SquarePants? Well, there you have it, SpongeBob fans. If you like the video, please leave a comment and subscribe to our channel so we can provide you with even funnier SpongeBob content. Until the next time, goodbye!